Being able to absorb vast amounts of information in a short period of time is almost like a superpower. But speed learning is a lot easier than you think. The key to speed learning is being able to retain all those golden nuggets of information in your long-term memory and creating a knowledge bank that makes this process so much easier. Hi, I'm Mike and I'm a personal development coach, and I've been teaching millions of people over on my YouTube channel Product Elon and coaching hundreds of clients one-on-one on how to absorb the most amount of information in the shortest period of time. Usually when we read a book or listen to a podcast or we watch a documentary, within 24 hours, we've probably forgotten about 90% of what you've learned, right? A week later, that number has probably increased to near 99%. So just imagine, even just the last 5 years, how much knowledge you've learned and then lost because of the inefficiencies of how our memory processes information. So in this class, we'll learn how to absorb information fast and retain it for the long term. We'll start by exploring the power of self-education, its many forms, and how you can make it an enjoyable experience, something that you actually want to do rather than something that you have to do. We'll go through the process of creating a knowledge bank using Notion or any tool of your choice, and we'll cover some of my favorite and most effective speed learning strategies, such as question-based learning, spaced repetition, and building your own talent stack. So this class is perfect for someone who is maybe a freelance creative that is really striving to learn to become the best in their field. Whether you're in marketing, illustration, animation, or film and video, it's great for students looking for ways to absorb large amounts of information in a short period of time, or anyone interested in personal development and making a conscious effort to becoming more knowledgeable in general. You can be a complete beginner when it comes to speed learning and using Notion, because I take you through step by step the fundamentals you need to get started. And by the end of this class, you'll not only have a knowledge bank, but also have a set of powerful learning strategies and a system that can serve you for years to come. So I'm super happy that you decided to take this class with me. I look forward to teaching you and helping you become a more knowledgeable version of yourself. In this class, I'll briefly go over what we're going to be building for the class project in the Creating Your Knowledge Bank lesson. So the knowledge bank is essentially the database that you'll create on Notion or your software of choice to store all the golden nuggets of information that resonate with you while consuming educational content. And if you haven't used Notion before, don't worry, it's completely free for the way that we're going to use it, and we'll be going through it step by step, and you can have your own knowledge bank built within just 10 to 15 minutes. It really is that easy. Also, Notion isn't an absolute requirement, right? I use Notion because my whole productivity system is run on Notion, both in my personal life and in my business life. However, if you're using other software like Trello or note-taking apps like Google Keep, then that's not a problem at all. The same principles apply, so when I'm going through the Creating Your Knowledge Bank lesson and teaching you how to build it, you can follow through and implement the same principles with your own software. The main goal for the end of this project is for you to have built a note-taking system designed for you to capture those golden nuggets of information that you want to remember long-term. I'd love to see what you guys have come up with, so feel free to upload your project into the project gallery. And if you do have any questions, let me know in the comments section and I'll do my best to get back to all of you. In this lesson, we'll explore why self-education is so powerful, because I've made hundreds of productivity and personal development videos over on my YouTube channel, and I get asked quite regularly, what's my #1 personal development strategy that I'd rank more powerful than anything else? And I say it all the time, it's self-education. It's making self-education a daily habit that you do every day, whether it's reading a book or listening to a podcast or watching YouTube videos. The type of self-education doesn't matter, but it's the consistency in how often you do it that's so powerful. So back in 2013, one of the first habits I made to consciously work on my own personal development was to consume 2 hours of educational content every single day, 7 days a week. And that one habit has completely changed the course of my life. A decade later, I'm still keeping up with that habit, although not as consciously. It's an automated behavior now. For example, when I'm eating dinner, I'll be watching a documentary on Netflix, or when I'm commuting to work, I'll be listening to a podcast in the background. Because I think that far too many people rely entirely on the formal education system when, at least in my opinion, the informal education system, so self-education, is far more powerful. If you want to get ahead of the competition, whether it's in your career, your university degree, whether it's making progress in your freelancing career, whatever it is, you really should be harnessing the power of self-education, because formal education such as school and university will allow you to become slightly above average at best, because everyone is learning the same information in the same way. To be exceptional, you need to do things that most other people are not doing, and learning things that most other people are not learning. So billionaire entrepreneur Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1 calls this stage the tournament. And according to the book, the tournament is designed to focus more on being a competition as opposed to making people actually successful. So grades exist to be exact measurements of how well a student can memorize a given batch of information, right? The problem with this is that the skills required to succeed in the tournament are often not the skills required to succeed in life. And this is not new information, right? Entrepreneur and motivational speaker Jim Rohn once said, "Formal education will make you a living, self-education will make you a fortune." Even Mark Twain in the late 1800s was reported to have saying, "I've never let my schooling interfere with my education." So to be exceptional, you need to do things that most other people are not doing and learning things that most other people are not learning. And the beauty of self-education is that there are no thick, heavy textbooks, no boring lectures, no stressful exams. It should be entirely driven by your own curiosity using forms of media that you enjoy consuming. So over in the workbook on the Power of Education page, I have 2 exercises for you. The first is to write out as many self-education methods as you can. So I've already given you a head start with reading books, watching educational YouTube videos, watching documentaries, and listening to podcasts, but also try thinking outside of the box too. For example, even going for coffee with someone who is knowledgeable in an area that you want to improve in is actually a very powerful form of self-education. Next in the workbook, I have a second exercise to help you with stimulating new ideas. And this is really quite important. So the exercise is to list down all the topics that you find interesting. This list could literally be any topic, as long as they're somewhat educational. So a lot of the topics could be relating to your career and the industry that you want to make progress in, but they don't all have to be. So for example, for me, I'd probably jot down productivity, mental models, business, finance, economics, all subjects that can help me in some way towards my career. But I'll also write down both world wars, for example, because maybe weirdly, I love watching war documentaries. And these topics that are unrelated to your career path are actually very important, because the main idea with self-education is that you keep it fun and interesting. If you're just learning about your career every single day, eventually you're going to burn out. So these topics, unrelated to your career, but that you find really interesting, help add diversity and a variety to the content consumption, meaning that you're far more likely to stick with self-education in the long run. So whether you're using self-education to move forward with your freelancing career, whether you're becoming more knowledgeable in marketing or design or photography, whatever industry you're in, self-education is what's going to help you accelerate your career progression. And I'd love to see all the different and kind of diverse topics that you guys have come up with. And I do encourage you to post your list of topics in the project gallery, and also feel free to post your lists of forms of content consumption in the project gallery too. Or you could even just write a list in the comments if that would be easier, because I do read every single comment, and in the next lesson we'll talk about my own full comprehensive list of forms of content consumption. So I'll see you over in the next lesson. The main aim for this lesson is to go through a fully comprehensive list of the different forms of content consumption you can use in your own self-education journey, because there are just so many, and it's important that you pick the forms of media that you enjoy consuming. For example, not everyone likes reading books, right? Best-selling author Simon Sinek, who's one of the leading pioneers in the self-development space, mentioned in the Diary of a CEO podcast that one of his weaknesses was that he doesn't like to read. He's a best-selling author, but he's written more books than he's read.
Everybody thinks I'm extremely well read. And the reality is I've written more books than I've read. I love the idea of reading. I can't read. I don't read. I learn by listening and talking.
And I think that society pushes us into feeling like we have to read to be knowledgeable, which is completely untrue, but it puts a lot of people off self-education, because if you're forcing yourself to read, then you're just not going to stick with it long term, right? Like Simon Sinek says, I learn by listening and talking. So his forms of content consumption are probably steered more towards listening to podcasts or watching documentaries or attending offline workshops or talking to mentors. So over in the workbook on the approaches to self-education page, I've made my own comprehensive list of forms of media that you can consume, such as podcasts, documentaries, blog posts. I mean, there are so many, and it's important that you pick the content consumption that you enjoy consuming the most. If I have missed any, then do let me know in the comments, and I'm sure that I probably have missed some because I'm always adding to the list and finding new ways and new methods to learn. And also, it's important to check the source of your learning too. So for example, we've published non-fiction books or documentaries. Those sources are usually relatively reliable, but if you're reading a blog post, was it written by a reputable author? If you're reading a news app, does that news source have political bias? If you're reading Wikipedia, well, anyone can edit a Wikipedia page, right? So it's important that you're always questioning the credibility of the source. And with that in mind, I also have a quick exercise in the workbook for you to complete. It's very simply to choose your top 3 content consumption mediums and then pair them with 3 main topics that you want to learn about. So for example, for me, I would write documentaries and pair that medium with World War documentaries. Then I'd choose podcasts and pair that with personal development and productivity topics. And then I'd choose talking to people more knowledgeable in specific areas, and I'd pair that medium with topics surrounding business. Again, do upload your worksheets to the project gallery section of the course, because I do read every one of them, and I'll of course try my best to reply to. And besides, it's just nice to see each individual student's progress throughout the course. So the main takeaway from the lesson is that you need to find a medium of content consumption that suits you, and feel free to mix and match as well. Really, the more variety in your learning methods, the better. And in the next lesson, we're going to go one level deeper and start learning about the knowledge bank. In this lesson, we're going to finally talk about the knowledge bank. So often when reading a book or listening to a podcast or watching a video, most of the information won't resonate with you. So for example, if you read a book, you probably just take away about 5 or 6 golden nuggets from that entire book. The other 98% of the book is not actually that important. It's just fluff, right? The problem is that authors can't just sell you a book with 1 page of super compacted golden nuggets, because it just wouldn't sell. However, you spend hours consuming content for that 1% of golden advice. I'd listen to a 2-hour podcast just to extract 3 or 4 golden nuggets of information that resonate with me so powerfully that it triggers me into taking action and changing how I live. So the knowledge bank has 2 main functions. The first is that it's designed to capture that 1% of information that really matters. The second function is that it encourages you to periodically, say once a month, review those golden nuggets of information you've inputted into it. And this is really where the knowledge bank shines, because there are so many different approaches to taking notes. But it's not the act of taking notes itself that is what's important. It's the review process of those notes that are important. You can write the most amazing notes, but if you never go back to reviewing them, then you'll quickly forget about them. It's just how our memory has been designed, right? It's not actually that efficient. So let me give you an example. If I asked you from the last book you read, what do you actually remember? If your answer is nothing, then that's exactly why we have the knowledge bank, right? And if you do remember something, then that's great. You can add those golden nuggets to your knowledge bank. By reviewing your knowledge bank at least once a month is keeping that information fresh at the front of your memory so you can actually use what you learn rather than you eventually completely forgetting everything. So the main takeaway from this lesson is that the knowledge bank has two main functions: to capture that 1% of information that really matters and to help you review that information at least once a month. And in the next lesson, we're going to go through the actual steps to take to create your own knowledge bank. So this lesson is where we're going to create the knowledge bank. So I'll be going through step by step with Notion, and if you haven't used Notion before, don't worry, it's completely free for how we're going to use it. It doesn't take too long to become familiar with it, and I'll also add an instructional guide with screenshots in the workbook too to make it even easier to follow through each step. Okay, so to start your knowledge bank, you open up Notion, and in the bottom left, you'll see New Page. Click on that and type in knowledge bank. There's 3 dots in the top right. You can open that and toggle on full width. And also add icon, I usually use a brain, and add cover. And the cover can be whatever you like it to be. Then you click off. In the bottom left, you'll see in the submenu that you have the page created. So first we'll add the introduction text. So here you can pretty much write what you want. It can be a commitment of what you're going to use the knowledge bank for or how often you're going to review the knowledge bank. For me, I'm just copy and pasting basically what the knowledge bank does. So once you've entered that, you can enter twice and then use the / key and scroll down to database inline. And pretty much there you have the table. We can remove this hide database title because we won't be needing that. And here you have a very basic table to create your knowledge bank. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 more columns. We'll just have them as text for now. It's important that you see the A symbol here, the underlined A symbol, that this is golden nuggets. And the reason for this is because this is the only column that has an open section where you can open it up. None of the others do. So we'll drag this over to the second column. So the second column is golden nuggets, and then the first column will have review. The third column we will have topic. And the fourth column, we will have source. And to change the type for the review section, you go to checkbox, because this is really important if you're checking through the knowledge bank to make sure that you remember everything. By ticking the checkbox, it's a lot easier to see what you've done and what you haven't done. Golden nuggets, we can make that a bit bigger. Topics, so you go to type and go down to select. And then in select, you can type in different tags. So if you're studying, you might have 5 or 6 different modules. So for example, psychology might be one, and then you just type it in and press enter. Business might be one, economics might be one. And then, so when you write your golden nugget, let's say some interesting quote here, then the topic, you can change the topic, psychology, business, let's say it's business. And then in the source section, maybe you learned it from a YouTube video, maybe you learned it from a podcast, or maybe a friend told you it, maybe a lecture notes, that kind of thing. So if you do want to go back to it, then you can easily go back to it with the source. So if you want to add more information, because the idea with the golden nuggets is that you really summarize it into one sentence, right? You don't want to be writing paragraphs and paragraphs here. However, if you do want to add more information, you can click open, and right here, you can literally write as much as you want. And that right there is a very basic knowledge bank. I mean, you can add your own columns, you can add your own rows, you can really kind of customize it to however you like. For me, I keep it super simple. I'll show you really quickly my own knowledge bank. So you can see here is exactly how I just went through it there, but I've added quite a lot of information. But in the topic section, I only have 6 topics, right? So business general, Web 3.0, psychology, productivity, and economics. And then when I open up the section, a lot of the times I don't have
more information in there, because often I don't need to, but some of them say like this one, I have a bit more of an explanation because I felt that just one sentence wasn't really enough. So I just added that bit more. And then obviously I've added the sources here as well. So that is a really quick summary of how to create the knowledge bank. Like I mentioned, it doesn't take long. It literally takes maybe 10 minutes and then you can use it forever, basically.
The reason why I only have 4 columns in the database is to keep it as simple and minimalist as possible. I don't want to add any unnecessary columns or features that are just going to complicate the note-taking process. As for each column, the review column is to utilize spaced repetition at least once a month. The golden nuggets column is relatively short to encourage you to summarize your golden nugget into one sentence. If you want to add more detail, you can click open and add as much information as you like. The topic column is great if you're studying different topics at university or you're learning about different topics with your self-education like I am. And the source column is just in case you want to go back and re-listen to that podcast or reread that book. I do encourage you to make your own Notion database from scratch just so you can customize it exactly how you want. But also, if you're new to Notion, it's a good introduction to how to use the basic features of the software, because I know a lot of people are quite intimidated with Notion at first, at least I was, but it's surprisingly easy to navigate after about 15 minutes or so of using it. I have, however, added a template of my own knowledge bank in the resources section of the class in case you want to use that to get started, and the instructional guide with screenshots is also in the workbook, which should help guide you that bit easier. So once you have your own knowledge bank built, in the next lesson, we're going to go through some speed learning strategies that you can use alongside your knowledge bank to supercharge your self-education. In this lesson, we're going to go through probably my favorite learning strategy, and that is question-based learning. So question-based learning is exactly what it says on the tin. It's learning based on questions. And if you take away anything from this lesson, let it be this: when you're learning, you need to be actively learning rather than passively learning if you have any chance of effectively absorbing large amounts of information in a short period of time. So one of the best ways of learning in an active way is using question-based learning approach. I love this because it's so simple yet so effective. Often the best ideas are. It's like if you and your friend are studying for the same exam, you both have the same amount of time to study for it, and you both have the same resources and intellectual ability. It's the person that uses question-based learning that is probably going to perform much better in the exam because they're being far more strategic in their learning approach. So question-based learning takes advantage of your natural curiosity, meaning that you're not learning things that you are forced to learn, but rather you're learning things that you want to learn. And this is the essence of self-education. So if you open up your knowledge bank and look at the topics that you have, you can write out some questions based on what makes you curious. And you don't have to stick to one subject. Really, you should be very kind of flexible and just go with the flow. If you feel like you're getting bored with one subject, then switch to another. So for example, if I wanted to learn about Marxism, which is essentially a political and economic theory where society has no class, so no working class, middle class, etc., everyone is on the same level, I would learn about Marxism using question-based learning by listing out a series of questions that naturally make me curious. So for me, those would be, who is Karl Marx? What countries implement Karl Marx? So I'm relating the theory back to real life. Was Marxism successful in the countries that it was implemented in? What is the difference between Marxism and communism and socialism? Again, I'm relating this subject back to my own personal life because I'm living in a communist country right now, Vietnam. So I'm using contextual learning to relate the theory to my own life. Now, question-based learning is so effective for multiple reasons. Firstly, you come up with the questions yourself that make you naturally curious, meaning when you think about that topic, what are the immediately questions that pop up into your head? Because those are the questions that instigate your curiosity, so you're using your curiosity to your advantage to help propel and drive the learning process. Secondly, it gives you an end goal to your learning. So the end goal here being that by the end of your studying, you should be able to answer all the questions you just wrote out. It adds that extra bit of meaning to your studying, so you're less likely to feel like you're studying just for the sake of it or just to pass an exam, right? Thirdly, question-based learning helps with active recall. Now, active recall is also incredibly powerful because it helps prevent you from passive learning. So after you've finished studying, you can go back to the questions you wrote out and essentially test yourself as though it was an actual exam. So if you can answer that question well, then it means that you've passed and you can move on to the next question. But if you can answer that question well, then it probably means that you need to spend a bit more time on learning that area. The main takeaway from this lesson is that question-based learning is so effective when combined with self-education because both question-based learning and self-education are similar in that they allow your natural curiosity to lead your learning. In the next lesson, we'll explore another powerful learning method, spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is a powerful memory technique in of itself, but when combining spaced repetition with the knowledge bank, it takes your approach to learning to a new level. So that's what we're going to be talking about in this lesson. Spaced repetition is a learning method where you learn a certain fact, but then you keep going back to that fact over increasing time intervals. So for example, if you're memorizing the periodic table, you'd spend 20 minutes or so going through it, then 1 day later you'd go through it again, 3 days later you'd go through it again, then 1 week later you'd go through it again. So you can see that the time intervals are actually increasing, and it's a very efficient way of learning because it allows the neurons in your brain responsible for remembering the material to be strengthened. It takes advantage of the spacing effect that shows that learning is more effective when study sessions are spaced out over a long period of time rather than cramming in study sessions over a short period of time. So the knowledge bank has been designed to work directly with spaced repetition, with the idea being that you recap the information in the knowledge bank at least once a month. And it shouldn't take too long depending on how much information you have in your bank. It should maybe take 10 minutes a month and could take you even 1 hour a month. Either way, it's an extremely effective use of your time to review those golden nuggets because it makes your note-taking a constant learning process, whereas with most note-taking methods, you write the notes down and then you forget what you wrote. Another little hack that you can use is to set a day in your calendar to prompt you to review your knowledge bank. So for me, it's always the last Sunday of the month, which fits in perfectly with my schedule because Sunday is my kind of learning / relaxation / reading time. And if you don't use a calendar, because not everyone does, then whatever you use to schedule your day, maybe a planner or an alarm on your phone, you just need something to trigger that reminder once or twice a month. So the main takeaway from this lesson is that spaced repetition is a very effective memorization method. The knowledge bank is a very effective note-taking method. So when you combine the two, you have a really powerful learning mechanism that makes self-education a constant learning process. And speaking of constant learning processes, in the next lesson, we're going to be talking about how you can learn and develop new skills in a very strategic way in order to progress in whatever area of life you want to progress in. The concept is called the talent stack, and that's what we're going to be covering next. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the concept of talent stack. So the talent stack was coined by Scott Adams in the 90s, is essentially just a fancy way of saying combining a bunch of ordinary skills in a way that make you extraordinary. And it works so well because if you focus on developing just one single skill, you need to be world class, right? You need to be among the best in the world at that one thing. Think Tiger Woods, think Lionel Messi, think Elon Musk. But realistically, 99.9% of us are not going to get anywhere near that level. Therefore, building a set of skills at an above average level, maybe that main skill, would make more sense. An example of a very simple talent stack significantly accelerating someone's career would be Jacob Clifford, who is an economics teacher in the US. And he combined a small number of skills and created a YouTube channel teaching economics. And now he's one of the most well-known economic teachers on the planet. So he has his main skill set of teaching economics because that's his profession, but his subset of skills that helped him build his YouTube channel and consequently differentiate himself from the other millions of economic teachers were presenting skills to keep his viewers engaged, videography to film his YouTube videos, video editing to edit his videos, graphic design to edit his thumbnails, and combining these skills, they become greater than the sum of their parts. Even though he was only slightly above average at most of those subjects, they still added up to exponentially skyrocket his success.
Here, and boom. This computer had something that very few computers at the time had, the ability to edit video. And that is tip number 4, develop skills. For me, it happened to be understanding economics and being able to explain it to other people and being able to video edit. I needed those 3 things if I was gonna make these videos and start doing what I.
So whatever industry you want to carve a career out of, you have your main skill set, right? Maybe it's being a marketer or a designer or a photographer, but then you develop a small group of sub-skills that complement the main skills, such as marketing, sales, web design, video editing. All of these skills can very effectively complement your main skill and set you apart from the competition. I'm using this same strategy for my own business, right? So I make videos on productivity. I'm in no way the world leading expert in productivity, but I don't need to be in order to compete in the productivity space if I have the right talent stack. So when I first started my business, my main skill was productivity. Then I started learning how to edit videos and uploaded my first video on YouTube. In the process, I added video editing to that skill set. I then downloaded Photoshop and started learning how to use it to make thumbnails. And then I added graphic design to my skill set. Then I needed to learn about SEO to rank my videos, and so I added that to the skill set. And after a while, all of these skill sets added up. I'm still working on building that skill set. So for example, sometime in the future, maybe this year or next year, I want to write a book, so I'll start adding the skill set of writing to my talent stack. And it's not like I'm trying to be an expert with every skill set, right? I think aiming to be in the top 10% with all the skill sets that you're developing is a good target to aim for. And this way you can very strategically build your own success. Now, this is an important lesson, so I've designed a worksheet to go with it to help you design your own talent stack. So if you open the workbook and head to the talent stack page, and the first exercise starts with spending 5 minutes self-reflecting on what your current skills consist of. For example, for me, it might be productivity knowledge or video editing and YouTube strategy and graphic design and marketing and SEO. The second question asks, where do you want to be with your career in 3 to 5 years' time? So you might want to pivot your career into animation or illustration or film and video, or you might want to become a freelancer. The third question is, in order to achieve those career goals, you probably need to develop a set of skills to get you to where you want to be. So what are those skills? For me, I want to be an author in the future, so I really do need to develop my writing skills. And for example, I also need to improve my marketing skills too. So I'd add those skill sets to the worksheet. Like I always say, keep us updated and post your worksheet in the project gallery. Maybe I can give you some input or some advice with your own talent stacks. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me in the comment section. So this lesson was about the talent stack, about really being strategic and intentional with your career pivot or your career progression. In the next lesson, we're going to be talking about consistency, because all what we've learned so far in this class is largely meaningless without a healthy dose of consistency. In this lesson, we're going to be covering the compounding effect of consistency and how small, seemingly insignificant decisions can have a truly monumental effect on your life. To explain the compounding effects, let me introduce you to the 1% rule, and it was popularized by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits, and it basically states that if you can just consistently become 1% better at what you do each day, over the course of 365 days, your progress will snowball into something huge. And what I love about this is that it's so simple. And the best ideas and principles often are, right? I was watching an interview on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, and it was John Danaher, who's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and one of the top coaches in the world, and he explained it really well.
Most people live day to day where the events of yesterday have no bearing on the events of today, and the events of today have no bearing on the events of tomorrow. And this means your life will simply run in a flat line until the day you die. But if we make a concerted effort to build one day upon another, even if it's just a very small thing. And in most cases, it will be a small thing. It's rare that we have a day where something monumental happens. Most days are not monumental, they're mundane. So on every one of these mundane days, we have to take one small little gem that happened. It may not be very big, something small, and add that to your performance tomorrow.
For example, if you just learn one golden nugget each day, over a year or 2 years or 5 years, you'll become exponentially more knowledgeable. And that's why the Knowledge Bank is so powerful, because whereas most people are forgetting what they learned within a few days or weeks, the information that you are learning is being refreshed in your memory every month because you're reviewing your knowledge bank. And so when new information enters your memory, your knowledge just keeps growing. It's also useful if you have exams coming up and you use your knowledge bank to store information on the content that you're learning, or if you have a work interview or presentation where you need to have all of that information that you've been learning in the forefront of your mind. I spend about 5 or 10 minutes quickly going through it if I have a podcast on a certain subject. So for example, if I'm a guest on a business podcast, I know that we're going to be talking about business topics, and I'll go through all the business related golden nuggets in the knowledge bank, so all of those ideas are fresh in my memory. The main takeaway here is, again, the knowledge bank is designed for you to create a learning process that works for you. It's not something that you do for a week and then stop, but it's a lifelong system that can help you in so many areas of your life, because becoming very slightly more knowledgeable every day over a period of a year, you're going to see massive changes, the kind of changes that people will notice. Throughout this class, we've covered 3 main concepts: the power of self-education, building your own knowledge bank, and 4 of my favorite learning strategies. So you now have a system you can use to advance with your career in the most strategic way and become significantly more knowledgeable over the long term. And once again, I do encourage you to post your final projects in the project gallery of the class. I do read all the projects that are posted in there, and I read all the comments, and I do my best to reply to everyone too. I want to say thank you so much for sticking to the end of this class. If you want to leave me a review as well, I'd love to hear from you and know what you think. I'm going to be making more lifestyle classes on topics such as productivity, speed learning, daily habits, that kind of thing, so do stay tuned. If you're a student studying for your exams, I already have 2 classes that I made recently, one on how to combat procrastination and another on how to boost productivity, specifically for students. You can check out my profile to watch those. And if you want to turn your self-education into a habit, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, spending 2 hours a day consuming educational content back in 2013 was probably the single most important habit that I've ever made. Then you can watch my class 21 Days of Purposeful Productivity, forming habits for long-term goals that will help you build habits to stay consistent with your self-education. I hope you all have an amazing day. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you in the next class.